From 2011 to 2014, Shungiku Nakamura, author of the boys' love manga Sekai Ichi Hatsukoi, released 6 light novels centered around Yokozawa Takafumi, a recurring character and antagonist in the series. The novels not only cover Yokozawa's newfound romance after being rejected by Takano, but also round out a character who, for the longest time, mostly functioned as an obstacle for the main couple to overcome. Yokozawa has slowly become one of my favorite characters because of his development in the novels. On March 15, 2014, an animated movie adaptation of the first novel was released. Over the past 2 months, I revisited the anime, novels, and movie. I was fascinated with the changes made between the novel and the movie, so I decided to make this video comparing the two. Unlike most of the episodes in the original anime TV series, the movie is entirely based off of a written novel. The novel takes advantage of a third-person narrator to allow readers to understand Yokozawa's innermost thoughts, as well as to establish the setting and some background details. The movie is also 45 minutes long, so as a result, a lot of dialogue and details are cut for time, but the core elements of the story remain. With all that said, here's my breakdown of every difference between the novel and movie versions of Yokozawa Takafumi no Baai, Volume 1. In the opening scene of the novel, when Yokozawa wakes up at the hotel, he finds his boxers in his bed and slips them on. In the movie, he simply wakes up and stays naked throughout the entire scene. The novel includes a little more of Yokozawa and Kirishima's dialogue from the bar. The novel also includes more lines where Yokozawa admits he can't remember anything from the previous night, and Kirishima teases him for this. In the novel, Yokozawa asks Kirishima if he's gay, and throughout this part of the conversation, we learn Yokozawa's perspective on his own sexuality, as well as the implication that Kirishima is pansexual, since he describes himself as being attracted to strong-willed personalities, regardless of gender. In the movie, this part of the dialogue is entirely omitted. In the novel, there's some more dialogue about Yokozawa's rant from the previous night. Kirishima even goes so far as to deduce that the person who dumps Yokozawa works at Marukawa. The part of the scene where Kirishima pins Yokozawa to the bed plays out differently. In the novel, Kirishima taunts Yokozawa for not being able to remember the events from the previous night. He tells Yokozawa he likes taking down prideful guys. In response to this, Yokozawa stands up to fight Kirishima, only to get pegged to the bed. Then, after this, Kirishima orders Yokozawa to be his servant. In the movie, Kirishima first tells Yokozawa he'll be his servant from now on, then says he's doing so because he likes taking down prideful guys. Then, Kirishima pegs him to the bed, and then finally reveals he has photos of Yokozawa to blackmail him into submission. The movie also skips Kirishima's brief lecture about underestimating people, Yokozawa's attempt to negotiate and split the bill, and Yokozawa viewing the bill from the previous night. We learn that Yokozawa would not have been able to cover the bill. In the novel, the scene ends with Yokozawa standing up from the bed, trying to grab Kirishima's phone from his hand in order to delete the photo. Kirishima dodges, and there is some more dialogue about Kirishima's motives. In the movie, Kirishima leaves as he reveals he has photos of Yokozawa. The latter stays in bed, shocked from the whole situation. In the novel, Yokozawa stops by his apartment and a convenience store on his way to work. In the movie, we skip straight to him arriving at work. In the novel, it's mentioned that Kirishima got Yokozawa's suit from the previous night dry cleaned, so Yokozawa shows up to work in the same suit as the day before. In the movie, he's wearing an entirely different suit. The entire elevator scene stays intact, but with the third-person narration in the novel, we know for certain how Yokozawa feels. We learn that Yokozawa isn't being snarky when he suggests that Onodera transfer to literature, if that's what he truly wants. We also have confirmation that Yokozawa wasn't planning to steal Takano away from Onodera in the future. He says this in order to push Onodera to be more upfront with his feelings. He also repeats a line that Kirishima said earlier, about it being too early to ask his superiors for advice. This realization causes Yokozawa to soften his tone toward Onodera. The scene where Yokozawa needs promotional materials from Japun plays out differently. In the novel, Yokozawa tells Henmi to go to Japun's office to get the materials. As Henmi's about to leave, he runs into Kirishima, who came to the sales department to deliver said materials. Kirishima approaches Yokozawa in front of the other employees and suggests they go out drinking. Back and forth dialogue about Yokozawa being a loudmouth and hard to work with is cut. Kirishima even ruffles his hair in front of the other co-workers and tells him to be nicer to his subordinates, before eventually reminding Yokozawa of their deal from that morning. Yokozawa panics and finally obliges. In the anime, Henmi is unavailable, so Yokozawa goes to Japun's office himself to get the materials. When he arrives, Kirishima shows him the new cover for the new volume of Zakkan. a famous manga that's repeatedly referenced in both Sekai Ichi and its sister show, Junju Romantica. Kirishima is in charge of the author of Zakkan, Iju and Kyo. Both Iju and Kyo and Kirishima are originally from the Junju Romantica manga, though Kirishima makes his animated debut in this movie. As Yokozawa views it, he overhears banter between Takano and Onodera from afar. Kirishima notices this, and then invites Yokozawa for drinks. Kirishima quickly reminds him of the events from that morning, and Yokozawa obliges. At the bar, Kirishima warns Yokozawa not to drink too much, and reminds him he'll be turning 30 soon. In the movie, this dialogue is skipped. In the novel, Yokozawa brings up Takano as an example of an extremely prideful person, but in the movie, Kirishima is the one to name drop Takano. In the novel, there's some more dialogue where Kirishima refers to Takano as a greenhorn, referencing his youth and lack of experience. He also teases Yokozawa for being a greenhorn, or being experienced due to his age, and even offers to teach him the ropes. In the anime, this part of the conversation is cut. In the novel, Yokozawa leaves the counter to go to the restroom and reflect. Kirishima teases him about being too insensitive and not drying his hands properly. In the movie, Yokozawa leaves the counter to answer a call from work. In the novel, Kirishima is the first to suggest leaving the bar, stating he doesn't want to spend another night away from home. In the movie, Yokozawa decides to leave and return to work after his phone call, and Kirishima follows suit. In the novel, Kirishima kisses Yokozawa as the latter pulls out his wallet to pay his half of the bill. Drunk partygoers on the side cheer them on as they kiss. In the movie, Kirishima kisses Yokozawa before the latter can reach for his wallet, and the drunk passers-by aren't shown. In the novel, we learn via narration that Yokozawa's shoes get worn out from doing his rounds to the bookstores, yet another expense on his plate. He also bumps into a woman on his way to Marimo Books. In the movie, all this is skipped. In the novel, at Books Marimo, Yokozawa sees the first book that Takano worked on at Marukawa and reflects. Yokozawa also has a brief conversation with Yukina. In the movie, both these scenes are skipped, and we simply see Yukina working in the background. In the novel, it's mentioned that Kirishima has dragged Yokozawa out for drinks or meals almost every day since their night at the hotel. It's also mentioned that a little over a week has passed since Takano dumped Yokozawa. The movie adds to this by showing a montage of these outings, and a scene where Yokozawa obliges so the photos aren't leaked. In the novel, Yokozawa stopped by the Emerald office to tell them how the latest volumes were selling. He overhears from employees that Takano and Onodera shared a bed on their business trip. This whole scene comes from the end of the manga chapter, The Case of Onodera Ritsu, number 11, where Takano and Onodera go on a business trip, and due to a mix-up, they end up in a hotel room with one bed. In this scene, word gets around that they shared a bed, and Onodera's co-workers tease him. However, we're now seeing it play out from Yokozawa's point of view. We also learn that Sapphire is Marukawa's BL label. This entire scene is skipped in the movie. Immediately after this scene, though, Yokozawa goes to his own office and encounters the sale fiasco. The movie keeps this scene intact, save for one line in which Yokozawa allows Kirishima to scold him for his mistake, asserting that he won't fight back. In the novel, Hio owns a blue bicycle that can be seen in the entryway to Kirishima's apartment. In the movie, this is changed to a pink scooter. Kirishima's line about being the one to take care of Yokozawa is omitted. Both the movie and novel briefly touch upon Kirishima's late wife, explaining that she died of illness shortly after Hio was born. However, the novel has more lines, with Kirishima explaining that his wife passed around the same time that Yokozawa joined Marukawa. This implies that Yokozawa would have joined Marukawa shortly after college, and in Volume 6, this fact is confirmed. Some additional banter about Yokozawa blushing and Hio waiting on them to join her for dinner is cut. In the novel, at dinner, Yokozawa offers to tutor Hiyori in math, mentioning that he used to be a tutor in college. He pinky promises to help her out after dinner. In the movie, this part of the conversation is omitted. In the novel, Hio leaves to get the salad, then the family says "itadakimasu." In the movie, they say this at the beginning of the scene, and Hio gets the salad later. The movie omits some lines between Kirishima and Yokozawa that reference their earlier conversation from the hotel about Yokozawa being gay. As I stated before, that conversation was omitted from the movie altogether. There's also some dialogue about Yokozawa and Hio getting along really well, and Hio asking if they like her curry. In the novel, when Yokozawa meets Kirishima in the Japun office, Kirishima explains that the author's dog was sick, hence why she couldn't meet her deadline. Kirishima relates because he would be just as much of a wreck if something similar had happened to Hio. As Yokozawa leaves, he asks Kirishima to let Hio know he's on his way, and Kirishima thanks him for his help. All these parts of the conversation are omitted from the movie. In this scene in the novel, Hio has twin braids. She has slightly different hairstyles throughout the novels, but in the movie, she's only ever shown with her high ponytail. In the novel, Hio talks about Yuki, her friend from school. Yuki is repeatedly mentioned throughout the novels, but in the movie, this part of the conversation is cut. In the novel, Yokozawa explains to Hio what macrons are, whereas in the movie, Hio simply thanks him for the treat. In the novel, Yokozawa calls Hiyori cute, and they have more dialogue about cooking. These lines are omitted from the movie. In the novel, this part of the scene ends when Yokozawa asks Hio not to laugh about him wearing the apron. In the movie, the scene ends with Hio explaining why it's important to wear the apron. Some lines about how the evening went and how Kirishima could be a better father are omitted from the movie. While the core focus of the dialogue stays intact, there are some omitted lines. These include an allusion to Yokozawa's lonely upbringing, Kirishima's poor cooking skills, Kirishima asking Yokozawa to spend the night, and Kirishima later giving him money for a cab home. Kirishima also hints at having the photo of Yokozawa wearing the red apron. In the novel, we see Yokozawa greeting the women at the front desk, who laugh because they've secretly seen the photo of Yokozawa wearing an apron. This part is cut out, and the movie skips right to Yokozawa overhearing the conversation by the elevator. In the novel, the employees describe that it's a photo of him wearing an apron, but in the movie, the details of the photo are not revealed to us until Kirishima shows it to Yokozawa. In the novel, it's first stated here that Japun's office is on the 5th floor, but throughout the movie, we see Yokozawa going to the 4th floor to see Kirishima. It's also shown throughout the original anime, and even in Junjo Romanica, that the elevator only goes up 4 floors. It's even more confusing because somewhere in the middle of the novels and the rest of the Sekai Ichi manga chapters, I think they either switch offices or switch buildings or something. Along with this, Volume 5 states that Yokozawa works on the 2nd floor, whereas in the anime, we clearly see that he works on the 3rd floor. And in Volume 6, it's mentioned that the anime division works on the 7th floor. I have no idea what's going on here, and it bugs me. In the novel, it's early in the morning, and Kirishima is the only person working in the Japun office throughout this scene. But in the movie, we see other Japun employees witnessing Yokozawa and Kirishima's conversation. For this scene, the movie cuts a lot of dialogue. They cut lines where Kirishima calls Yokozawa adorable, where he explains how he ended up showing more and more people the photo, some comments from 2 female co-workers speculating on the nature of their relationship, their theory about Yokozawa pining after Hio, and comments about his cooking skills, to name a few examples. When Yokozawa returns to the sales floor, he secretly tries to ask Henmi if he's seen the photo. Henmi thinks he's talking about something work-related and panics. These lines, and some minor dialogue about an upcoming meeting, are cut. In both the novel and the movie, after reflecting, Yokozawa goes to feed Sorata. However, in the novel, this is the first time we meet Sorata. Yokozawa has a one-sided conversation with him and reflects on how lonely it feels to eat by himself, now that he's so used to eating with the Kirishimas. The next scene shows Yokozawa taking Sorata to the vet. In the movie, Yokozawa takes Sorata to the vet on the same day that he yelled at Henmi. We first meet Sorata much earlier in order to establish Yokozawa's normal routine before growing closer to Kirishima. This scene is shown right before the sales mishap. In the novel, Yokozawa takes Sorata to the vet on a Sunday evening. Earlier that day, though, Yokozawa passed the handshake event centered around some female celebrities. Not understanding the hype around the celebrities, Yokozawa wonders if he really is gay. This scene is entirely omitted from the movie. In the novel, the Kirishimas meet Yokozawa in the waiting room of the vet's office. We see Yokozawa talking with the vet and then repeating the vet's advice to the Kirishimas later on. In the movie, the Kirishimas meet him outside the vet's office after the appointment, and Yokozawa simply rehashes the vet's advice. When Yokozawa and the Kirishimas are getting ready in the morning, there's some cut banter about Kirishima not being able to do Hio's hair. Kirishima actually tells Hio that he called Yokozawa motherly, and Yokozawa has more lines reminding Hio to get ready for school, further demonstrating his motherly or parental side. In the novel, Yokozawa and Henmi have some brief work-related dialogue before Yokozawa heads to the break room. In the novel, Takano mentions he tried to call Yokozawa's apartment the previous night. Yokozawa couldn't answer because he had spent the night at the Kirishima's place. To cover this, Yokozawa says he was at his parents' place. In the movie, this part of the conversation is cut. In the novel, Yokozawa uses work as an excuse to leave the room. In the movie, he simply says, "See you around," and ends the conversation on his own. In the novel, it's stated that Yokozawa has nail marks in his palms from clenching his fists throughout the scene. In the movie, we don't see this, and he simply heads to the emergency stairwell to reflect. In the stairwell, Kirishima mentions that he tries to cut back on smoking, though he sometimes gives in to the urge. This line is not included in the movie. As far as dialogue goes, this scene is almost identical between the novel and the movie, but there's a lot more going on here that I don't think the movie captures due to its short duration and lack of inner monologue. In the movie, Yokozawa realizes that Kirishima knows that Takano was the person who rejected Yokozawa. In the novel, through narration, we learn that Kirishima has seemingly known this fact for a while. It's heavily implied that Yokozawa actually revealed Takano's name on the night he got drunk. Yokozawa has no way of knowing this since he doesn't remember the events of that night. For both mediums, we never truly know if Kirishima learned this because Yokozawa told him, or if he picked it up from observation. I feel like the movie doesn't fully capture Yokozawa's feelings throughout this scene. In the movie, Yokozawa just appears to be mad at Kirishima for meddling and being nosy. In the novel, Yokozawa is in a state of shock. He lashes out at Kirishima because he realizes that Kirishima has been secretly trying to help him through his heartbreak. He didn't take Yokozawa out for drinks just to toy with him. He's been keeping him company to prevent him from falling deep into depression. Yokozawa is angry because he doesn't know how to deal with this revelation. He lashes out at Kirishima because everything Kirishima is saying about him is correct, and Yokozawa can't deny it. Kirishima also compares Yokozawa to himself, seemingly speaking from experience, but these lines are unfortunately cut. In the novel, as Kirishima leaves, he asks Yokozawa to take a cigarette since he has a pocket ashtray on hand. In the movie, he simply leaves, dejected. In the novel, Hio tells Yokozawa that Kirishima has been feeling depressed since Friday, the day that Yokozawa lashed out at him. She asks Yokozawa to talk to him. These lines are cut from the movie. In the novel, Yokozawa speaks first, teasing Kirishima for drinking before noon. In the movie, this line is omitted, and Kirishima speaks first, asking why he's here. In the novel, Yokozawa admits that everything Kirishima said about him was true. Kirishima admits that he overstepped his boundaries. He also thinks that Yokozawa is thanking him for taking care of Sorata. All these lines are cut from the movie. In the novel, before the scene ends, Yokozawa remarks that Kirishima would be better suited working for Emerald instead of Japun, given his cheesy lines. This comment is omitted from the movie. In true Sekai Ichi anime fashion, the movie ends here and cuts the sex scene. In the novel, the two go on to have sex for the first time as a couple. In this scene, Kirishima admits that they didn't actually hook up at the hotel. Kirishima undressed him to get him out of his rain-soaked suit, and they slept in the same bed. Though in the movie, we clearly see two beds with messy sheets, implying that they slept separately. In the final scene where the blackmail photo is revealed, Yokozawa and Kirishima clean up after just having had sex, setting this scene in the afternoon while Hio is still away. In the movie, this scene is included after the credits and takes place at night while Hio is sleeping. The movie ends when Yokozawa sees the photo, but the novel goes on to include Yokozawa's full reaction and some back and forth dialogue, and they ponder over how they'll eventually tell Hio about their relationship. Those were all the notable differences between the novel and movie versions of Yokozawa Takafumi no Baai. Overall, though the movie has good pacing and covers the key points of the relationship well, I think it could have benefited from a longer runtime. I don't think they needed to include every detail, like having Yokozawa talk to the vet and then having him retell that same advice to the Kirishimas right after, but an extra 5 minutes would have helped greatly with fleshing out the characters and world more. Those extra minutes could have been utilized to include details about Yokozawa's background and Kirishima's character. For example, the scene where Kirishima stays back at work because of the author's dog shows both us, the viewers, and Yokozawa his compassionate side. This is part of the reason why Kirishima is so well respected among his peers, and why Yokozawa admires him. I also loved learning more about Yokozawa's upbringing and younger days, and wish these tidbits were at least touched upon in the movie. I feel like the scene at the stairwell suffers the most from the short runtime. It wasn't until I read the novel that I fully understood what was going on. In this scene, Yokozawa has a life-changing revelation that completely recontextualizes the events leading up to that point. This is supposed to be an emotional and climactic scene, but I feel like it happens too quickly for the emotions to hit. And I can't help but feel that Kirishima's despondence comes out of nowhere, although this could just be me. I didn't understand why Kirishima was hurt until I read the novels and realized that Yokozawa's words were hurting him. Yokozawa realizes this, but he's too caught up in his emotions to stop yelling. Kirishima also regrets overstepping his boundaries, but this isn't addressed in the movie. The scene could have benefited from having more inner monologue from Yokozawa, and maybe including the lines about Kirishima relating to Yokozawa. I'm really glad they kept the balcony scene intact though, especially since we get more insight into the scene in the second volume. Even on its own, it's one of my favorite scenes in any anime because it's one of the few scenes out there that states that you don't have to forget your past relationships. You can treasure those feelings without being restrained by them. It's this revelation that helps Yokozawa move on from Takano. Overall, I really do enjoy this movie. The animation, voice acting, and music are stellar and add more dimension to a story and to Yokozawa as a character. I would love if they continued animating the rest of the Yokozawa novels as either a movie or miniseries, especially Volume 2, where we get more growth in the relationship and more Kirishima development. Kirishima is a pretty complex character, and without spoiling anything, his friendly, playful exterior is beautifully juxtaposed with his deeper emotions, and we learn many things about him that both add to and recontextualize many of the scenes from this movie. While some people may think it's pointless to ask for the novels to get an anime adaptation at this point, the fact that they made an animated Sekai Ichi special in 2020, which is 9 years after the anime's run and 6 years after the movie's release, gives me hope that we could eventually get more animated Sekai Ichi content. And I don't think it's far-fetched to want Yokozawa's story to also be further animated. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more Sekai Ichi related content, let me know in the comments below. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone!